Hey friends, today we are checking out Bob Baxley's $8,000 tiny home. He built this home with just sawdust, wood, and lime. Not only does he have an amazing home, he runs a successful homestead off that. He's gonna show us how he built this epic home and how he runs this epic permaculture homestead. Let's go.
Started as a bathhouse. So I built the timber frame, did the cordwood infill. We were living in our RV, wanted to have at least a place with a decent shower and a flush toilet and all that. And then COVID and one thing led to another. So we built this, changed the plan, put the Dustcrete addition on it. The whole thing was about 2 years of building out the rest of the farm and completing the structure.
What did you spend building this?
$8,000. So the floor plan isn't what I would have designed from scratch, but we adapted and it works just fine for our needs. So I basically just used the materials that were here. All this framing lumber I got from a buddy of mine down in the Front Range who runs a lumber company, and these were things that were rejected. All the infill here is Dustcrete, which you can go to my YouTube channel, Radical Gastronomy, and get the lowdown on what Dustcrete is and how these walls were made. And this is what you end up with, just Portland and lime, and it ends up having thermal mass, having R value. It'll take plaster without any lath, just right on it. This wall system comes in about $1.20. I mean, it solves sheathing, house wrap, insulation, drywall, texture, paint, all that is taken care of in this one material. So that is what allowed me to build the whole thing for $8,000. Come on in. So this is the addition. That's Dustcrete. Got the adobe floor in this section. And then over here is the original cordwood section of the house. That was going to be a closet, and I turned it into the kitchen. So our little ladder here stores out of the way in front of the shower. And then goes like that for the loft. And a full-size shower. Cobblestones from the river in there. And so the toilet location is a little unfortunate, but as I say, the original plan was this was just going to be a bathhouse. So we heat this place with this old 1977 Vermont Castings Vigilant. Usually a cordwood wall is going to be 16 to 24 inches thick. This one's only 9, but the basic idea is you've got 2 beads of mortar, one inside, one outside, and in the middle is an infill of dry lime with sawdust, and that acts as an insulative barrier and also prevents any insects or rodents from wanting to make their home in there.
And how come you went to Dustcrete instead of cordwood?
A few reasons. For example, this wall section behind the sink here took me 3 days to finish, whereas the wall section that's wider behind the TV took me 1 day. So it's much faster. You don't have the issue of the draftiness from around the logs where they shrink. All in all, I mean, it's a great look, but in terms of thermal efficiency and having a good tight house, this Dustcrete is hard to beat. Why didn't I use hempcrete? I built with hempcrete one time. In Colorado, there was a lot of extraneous hemp from just after the Prohibition. The problem is that there is no infrastructure in this country to process hemp. So if you want to get your hemp stalks processed, if you transport them more than 50 miles, the cost of transport will negate any profit you could possibly make. So although hempcrete's great, it's not really viable in the United States unless you are willing to pay for importing the material from overseas. The guy who was helping us with the hempcrete portion of it said, well, you can just substitute equal parts Portland and lime with this hemp shiv and get the same result. And sure enough, it's true. By using locally available lime and adding the Portland, we came up with something that works great and is a real game changer in terms of being able to build affordably. Well, my name's Robert Baxley, and I started out in my working life in the restaurant business. I spent 22 years in the restaurant business, the last 12 of which I own my own restaurant in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. Surviving in the restaurant business for 12 years is not very common, so did pretty well with it, and then a lot of external factors drove me out. Then started getting into natural building. We ended up coming over here to the North Fork Valley based on some prodding from Jake Tackett up at Cedar Springs Farm. He asked me, "Hey bro, what would it take you to get over here to the valley?" And I said, "There's nothing, man. I've got a fully installed permaculture system. I got fruit trees that are just starting to bear. I can't picture anything." And he said, "Well, you know, I think the farm next door is for sale for $200,000. I said, "Oh." We looked at that farm and it wasn't the right fit, but asked a realtor to send us postings when they came up. This place that we're on now popped up, and it was in the price range we were looking for. We stopped and toured this place, and we were both convinced that this was the move to make. So I've got plans for a cheese cave / root cellar, and a nice glass timber frame greenhouse, and probably a natural swimming pool here or there. Basically just picking away at it and doing what I can as I can. All in all, very happy that we made the move and really enjoying trying to weave ourselves into this little biome right here in the valley. This 3-acre grass alfalfa pasture is kind of the engine of a lot of the production here on the homestead. I use these Jersey A2 cows to produce milk. And so they're busy transforming all of this growth into good nutrition for us here on the farm. This one I brought home in the back seat of my truck when she was a week old, and raised her up from there on our other farm. And then Cinnamon is her daughter, and this Black Angus cross here is Cinnamon's daughter. That's Clover. She jumped the fence and went to visit the neighbor's bull in the next pasture up the valley here, and so that's how we ended up with her. But by rotationally grazing this pasture, we're able to produce a tremendous amount of biomass, and the cows feed the soil organisms, and the soil organisms feed the grasses, and it just works in the cycle. One thing interesting about cows, you can see she's got a sweat that comes off of her nose, and there's a name for it which I forget, but this substance actually stimulates growth in grass. So having cows on pasture, you not only get the benefit of the manure and the uranus fertility, but they're also engaged in this living biome interaction, and you get much more production than if you were to just cut it. You can see they've got alfalfa here at about a foot. They'll get all this trimmed down. So we like to, leave a good, strong polyculture in here. And the one thing I would like to add to my management of the system is to come in after they've cleared a paddock like this and just mow down all of the non-choice plants for them to give more sunlight to the plants that they like. So I'll have less thistle and less chicory and things like that over time. I'll probably actually this winter add some horizontal swales. Because of the regenerative grazing, the water infiltration capacity of the soil has increased to the point where it's difficult for me to flood from the ditch and get all the way across the pasture because it all wants to sink in. But this is really the largest open flat surface on the farm, 22 acres. A lot of it is in beaver marsh. Really the defining characteristic of this little bioregion is this 12 or so acre beaver pond system. There's one family of beavers that are down there in their den at the lowest pond, and then they've terraced this into 6 or 7 different pond levels that are all spring fed down through this marsh system. So in here we have a tremendous amount of biodiversity, all the way from the microbiology to duckweed, which is prolific, and I'm working on ways to utilize the duckweed as a protein source in my other animal feeds. It's about 45% protein by volume. And the nice thing about it is it reproduces very quickly. This riparian zone is just extra fecund, if you will. It's just teeming with life, producing a bunch of biomass. And so I just kind of follow the beavers' lead and try to learn from them how they're controlling water on the landscape and running their system. In a couple of instances, tried to drain little sections to develop springs and things like that, and they won't have it. So I just kind of leave it to them to run the system and just follow along and try to observe something good from what they're doing. So this is the creek that runs through our property. This is a year-round creek, and that's kind of the dream, right? To have something like this on your place. So not only do we have water rights that we use to irrigate our pasture that come out of this creek, we also have tailwater rights from the farm just upstream, and so I can make use of this water as well. We haven't done much to this, but this little oak forest in here is kind of remarkable because these gamble oaks, these oaks back here, have washed down from higher up in the high country in the course of the flow of this stream. Normally, these are up at about 8,000 feet, and we're down here at about 56 or so. And so really nice to have this nut-producing crop down here in the hardwood for firewood, and just the feel of this oak forest has kind of that enchanted vibe to it. A nice little point of diversity on the farm. In this little creek valley, there are serviceberry, three-leaf sumac, wild plums, apricots. A lot of times in permaculture, when we get to a new property, we're real excited to put it in a food forest. In this case, the food forest already exists, and I look at it more as my responsibility to develop a cuisine that goes along with the native plants and the things that are already here, than to come stomping in here and try to transform this into a system that grows the things that I would default to, like peaches and apples. Mostly I'm just trying to find everything. Every season I'm discovering something new that's a food crop in this system. So mostly just leave this alone and collect things from it from time to time. But it's a really beautiful way. It's already set up, and I don't think I could do much better. It's not easy to get onto land if you approach it from the conventional perspective of, oh, I have to have so many dollars in the bank and get financing and go the conventional route. That's very expensive and not available to a lot of people. But if you're willing to think outside of the box and be resourceful, the route that we took, essentially we flipped farms until we were able to get into a situation where we weren't carrying any debt. If you can go to a rundown, dilapidated, lower end farm that doesn't have much value for the big players in the game these days, reno the house, reno the food production system, and then market it as that, as a house that will also feed you and provide you with an income, then you can turn a profit on properties like that and do that a couple of times, and you'll find yourself in a situation where you can pay cash for the farm that you want. This coop is constructed entirely out of pallet wood, salvaged from Cedar Springs Farm, and we have our little laying flock in here. We cut them loose in the afternoon, but leave them in during the egg laying portion in the morning, and they help with pest control around the farm. Right here, we just finished a batch of meat birds. We run 75 or so at a time. Usually we do 2 in a season, only did 1 this year, but you can see where I'm standing is where they started. So this spot right here, 4 weeks ago, looked like this spot right here where we harvested them on Sunday. I could just keep rotating them through this grassy area, and as long as I irrigated it, the grass would consume all of the nitrogen the chickens leave behind and just get lusher and lusher and lusher. But in this small of a space, we're able to, in a period of 7 weeks, 3 weeks in the brooder, 4 weeks on the pasture, produce more than enough chicken for ourselves for the year. And we're able to have a little surplus and do some trading for hay and things like that. In just this small space, we're able to produce a chicken quality that is superior to anything you'll find out in the default economy. So that's what we get with our milk and non-GMO grain-fed pastured poultry. I take the buttermilk and the skim milk after we skim the cream off for butter and mix it into the grain, feed it to the chickens. So basically every meal of its life, it was having the best cereal that you'd ever want to have. And then we processed right here on farm, and Stefano, you were here helping us out. And that way we can control what happens in the slaughter process. Worth it to us to do that, just to have the finest quality for our dinner table. The grasshoppers have been a huge challenge this season. I'm going to add some turkeys to the system next year to help keep a lid on these guys, but there are some things that are doing fairly well in the garden. We basically produce all of the tomatoes that we need for salsa and marinara and barbecue sauce in this garden, all of our garlic. I've never in my farming career achieved onion sovereignty, but that's a dream, to be able to produce enough onions to provide for the menu for the entire season. But this is basically a second-year garden, most of it, and it's starting to improve. But my only inputs are wood chips and compost tea. I don't like to bring a lot of other things into it, just basically rely on the soil biology to adapt and flourish to feed the plants and keep everything in balance. But I run sort of a chaos style garden, let a lot of things go to seed, let a lot of things naturalize, and just kind of work around them. Because I'm not trying to produce vegetables for market, then I can be a lot freer in terms of how I approach things. I don't need each bed to produce a certain amount of calories or a number of heads of lettuce. And so it's really a free form kind of thing, not the focus of what we do here, but it definitely adds a lot of variety and color and good flavor to what we do in the kitchen. Hey, you pigs. They're not very entertaining at the moment.
So you're on 2 pigs?
Yep, so these were feeder pigs we got from Down Home Farm last fall. So they're coming up on a year old, and as soon as the weather cools, we'll go ahead and move them on into the freezer. But we have them not only because of our love of bacon, but also for the loops that they help us close on the farm. For example, when we processed all those chickens, we were able to directly feed all of the intestines to the pigs and let them have that good meal for them and not have to deal with the composting of animal parts and that sort of thing. So handy to have for that reason. But yeah, they are in here working this land over. They were right behind me last year, different pigs, but that was the pig run. And you can see it's just exploded back with more willow. So I can move them around and use them to prepare ground for gardens and that sort of thing. But yeah, I always like to have a pig on the farm during the warm season. And then the winter time, I like to get them off the pasture into the freezer, not have to carry a boar through the winter and breeding stock, and just rely on my brothers in the valley to help out with feeder pigs when it's time. You can see the den through there. So this is pond level 1, the bottom of the system. There's the beaver den right there. And so there's a mating pair and about 2 seasons worth of their offspring with them in there. But when you think about the amount of resource in these materials, this cattail, of course, every part is edible. Every season has a different focus on whether the root or the flowers or the shoots. They all can be consumed, but also used for thatch and weaving. But there's dog bane in here for cordage, and that 3-leaf sumac, these Russian olives, and just a lot going on. And that's all thanks to the beaver and the way they move around. I winter the cows. So I'll use a single poly line to describe an area from this cliff up and around and back into the cliff over there. But that provides them with good fresh drinking water all winter. And if I concentrate feed them in one place when I feed hay in the winter, then in the springtime I can gather all that up and use that as the fuel stock for my compost, which I use in the garden. So this provides them good shelter from the wind and the weather in the wintertime, keeps them close to the house so we can keep an eye on them, and I don't have to worry about moving them and rotating them. Just really try to reduce the workload and the daily chores significantly so that we can hang out and eat sourdough and bacon. So if people want to learn more about what we're doing here, you can follow me on Instagram Radical Gastronomy. Also, radicalgastronomy.com is my blog, and there are recipes going back a decade or so on there. And then, of course, the YouTube channel, Radical Gastronomy as well. So if you want to see the techniques that I use to build this house and how we go about things on the farm, a lot more content is available over there. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel right here.